We want to bring in our first panel for some analysis. Michele Flournoy was the #3 person at the Pentagon earlier in the Obama administration. She now heads up the Center for New American Security. General Carter Ham, the former commander of the multinational brigade in Mosul and more recently head of the U.S. Africa Command, and Mike Morell, who was #2 at the CIA. He is now a CBS contributor. And Mike, I want to start with you first. There was a report that we had gotten the head of Khorasan, this new, heretofore unheard of group of terrorists who has suddenly sprung up. But so far, there's been no confirmation of that. Do you have any information on that?
No, I don't. I think if he had been killed, we would know by now. I think the bigger question is this group was planning a very specific attack to bring down an airliner using some very sophisticated explosives. The question is, have we disrupted that? The answer is we really don't know yet. Sometimes you get intelligence that you've disrupted such a plot. Sometimes you don't. But Bob, I'll tell you, in my 4 years of serving as deputy director, we probably went through this 10 times where we had a specific plot. The president took action both to increase our defenses and to go after the terrorists. In every case, we disrupted it.
General Ham, I want to ask you, from a military standpoint, how effective do you think this campaign has been so far?
Well, it's clear that the airstrikes to date have halted the advance of ISIL, and certainly caused them to change the openness that they have been operating under. The next phase will be much more difficult as ISIL forces blend into the cities and into civilian populations. Identifying and targeting them will become increasingly difficult.
Michele Flournoy, you were at the Pentagon for a while. You worked for President Obama. You were at the very, among the top policy people there. I asked this question to Tony Blinken just now, but I want to ask you, what do you think was the tipping point for the president on this? Because this represents a fairly different way of thinking, it seems to me, when he decided to go into Syria here. What did it? What caused him to say, I got to do this?
I think it was a number of things. I think it was the spilling over of the ISIL threat into Iraq, and with a speed and success that I think surprised everyone. I think it was the flow of foreign fighters, the fact that you had thousands of people coming in to Syria to wage jihad who had Western passports, who could come back to Europe or the United States without having to get visas. And then I think ultimately it was the beheading of the American journalists and the fact that that brought it home to Americans in their living rooms watching the news. So I think those things combined to give him a sense he had to act.
What's your sense of that, General?
I would agree with Secretary Flournoy. I think it was this compilation of events that unfolded, and a recognition that ISIL presents a different kind of threat than one we have faced before, and that military action was required, but only as one component of a much broader ranging, overarching strategy.
Mike, what do you think?
I think it's two things. One is it's the threat that they pose to the homeland today, and the significant threat they could pose down the road. But it's also the fact that they pose a significant threat to the stability of the whole region. The failure of Iraq as a state, the possible failure of Syria as a state, and what that would mean for the whole region. I think you put those two things together, it forced him to act.
I thought the president, it was very interesting to hear him say that it was this chaos created by the Syrian civil war, that ISIS was sort of operating under the radar there, and that's how they were able to reinforce and rebuild their forces and emerge as a threat. What's your sense of that, General?
I think that's certainly partly true. We don't have great visibility, did not have great visibility into what was going on inside Syria, and to a degree, post the U.S. drawdown in Iraq, didn't have eyes and people in force on the ground in northern Iraq to detect that this situation was evolving.
Ms. Flournoy, who do you think is the most influential advisor in the president's circle right now?
You know, I think he hears from a number of key people, certainly his national security advisor, but also I think Secretary of State Kerry is very important, as are General Dempsey and a number of his military advisors. In my experience, this is a president who hears all points of view and weighs those. But I think, you know, the most important thing here has been the putting together of this coalition, because this coalition will actually not only help us fight ISIL, but also get some to our larger objectives in the Middle East.
Yes, Mike.
I just wanted to say something about this coalition, because I think it is very important that we've got so many countries working together. But there's something that happened a couple days ago that I want to mention about the coalition. You know, many Americans don't believe there's such thing as moderate Muslims. But a couple days ago, we had an Emirati pilot, a female Emirati pilot, flying in a fighter jet over Syria, dropping weapons on ISIS. And it's great symbolism that there are moderate Arab states.
General, what is the problem going to be ahead? I mean, everybody we hear says, you know, you can't get this done without some sort of ground combat troops in there. Do you agree with that?
I do. Ground forces will be required to dislodge ISIL from the towns, villages, and the large city of Mosul that they control. The question remains: will it necessarily be Western ground forces? And that has yet to play out.
Ms. Flournoy, will the Iraqis ever get their act together here? Do you see them as a viable ground force here?
I think they will likely get their act together with our help. I think having our special operators in there, our intelligence officers, and most importantly, having a new government that will be more inclusive of the Sunni population, that's the key to the cohesion of the force.
All right, we're going to take a break here. We're going to ask you to stick around for part 2 of our broadcast, and I'll be back in a moment with some personal thoughts. And welcome back to Face the Nation. Back with our panel, Michele Flournoy, former Defense Undersecretary, now at the Center for New American Security, Army General Carter Ham, who led the multinational brigade in Mosul, and Mike Morell, the former #2 at the CIA. General, let me ask you, we keep hearing reports of setting up a no-fly zone in northern Syria. Is that a good idea, and what does that entail?
I worry sometimes that when people say impose a no-fly zone, there's this almost antiseptic view of this as an easily accomplished military task. It's extraordinarily difficult. Having overseen imposing a no-fly zone in Libya, a force that is vastly inferior in the air forces and air defenses to that which exists in Syria, it's a pretty high-risk operation. We can do it. Certainly the Air Forces, the United States Air Force, and the aviation components of the Navy and the Marine Corps, the best in the world, unmatched, and they can do it, but it drives the risk up pretty high.
Well, what does it entail?
It first entails, we should make no bones about it, it first entails killing a lot of people and destroying the Syrian air defenses and those people who are manning those systems. And then it entails destroying the Syrian Air Force, preferably on the ground, in the air if necessary. This is a violent combat action that results in lots of casualties and increased risk to our own personnel.
Well, what about this whole idea? Bob Kagan, who writes a lot on security matters, said last week that we ought to disable the Syrian Air Force, bomb all their runways, and just keep their Air Force on the ground. How does that strike you, Ms. Flournoy?
You know, I think that would be a significant escalation and a real broadening of the objectives that the president's defined. Right now, we're focused on beating back ISIL, not entering into the Syrian civil war. So I think that is something that, you know, needs to be seriously debated before we go down that road.
And Mike, the whole idea, I mean, we kind of get to talking mostly about tactics, really, when you come back, tactical decisions, go after the, you know, anti-aircraft units or trucks on the ground. How does this new strategy that the president has outlined give us a broader overview of where we are on this and where we're going?
Bob, this is not the first time that an Islamic extremist group has taken territory. Some people think it is. It's not. Al-Shabaab had territory in Somalia. They still do. AQIM, which is an al-Qaeda group in North Africa, took a tremendous amount of territory in Mali. AQAP in Yemen took almost a third of that country before it was taken back by the Yemeni military. So this is the fourth time it's happened. I think we're going to see this kind of situation more and more in the future across the whole swath of geography where we see al-Qaeda today. So next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, we're going to see Islamic extremist group take territory, and we're going to have to figure out in each case how to take it back.
Let me just go around the table here. The president, the new strategy, do you think it's a good idea? Do you have problems with it? Just how would you sum it up in your feelings about it?
I agree with Michele. I think the strategy is very strong in Iraq. I think we're going to see success there. The strategy is weaker in Syria because we don't have a strong army on the ground to work with.
All right. Michele?
I would agree with that. And the other thing I would say is that I think we need to set expectations that this is going to take years to execute. We're not going to see easy or quick wins. This is a matter of patience and perseverance to be successful.
General.
I'd agree with Mike that says that Iraq is a little bit easier than Syria. Remains to be seen if the Iraqi military can get their act together with assistance and advising to accomplish the necessary tasks on the ground.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for helping us with this morning. And we'll be back with our reporter roundtable to talk about the president's new way forward and the rest of the news.